Welcome to Writer. I'm your host, Kat Filer. I'm also known as KJ Filer, author of Shadowrunner, and today my guest is Robert Gwaltney, an author of note in Southern fiction. His work has appeared in such publications as the Signal Mountain Review and the Dead Mule School of Southern Literature. His debut novel, The Cicada Tree, won the Somerset Award for Literary Fiction and the Georgia Author of the Year First Novel. So that was quite a feather in your cap. He is an active member of the Atlanta literary community, serves as prose editor for the Blue Mountain Review. By day, he serves as vice president of Easter Seals North Georgia Incorporated, a nonprofit organization strengthening children and their families at the most critical times in their development. And through his work, he champions early childhood literacy. And in all the in-between hours, he writes. Thank goodness for us. Robert, I'm so glad that you were able to join me. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Kat, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Like most authors, your writing was inspired by the literary works of others. And according to your bio, Charlotte Bronte, Jane Eyre, Truman Capote, Tennessee Williams were all influential, quite a diverse group. And I would love for you to talk about that.
Sure. I do have, I think, a very eclectic reading palette. And I'm a mood reader as well. So I think that for me, early on, you mentioned Jane Eyre. I read that, I think, when I was in the fourth grade. And I think that really gave me a love for the Gothic. Was a little obsessed. And then, of course, that translates for me to the Southern Gothic. And of course, one of the first books that I was fixated on as a young person was Truman Capote's debut novel, Other Voices, Other Rooms. But yeah, I think I have a very diverse palette. And of course, I think my inspiration is from others. I probably subconsciously and consciously weave thematically into my work as little Easter eggs sometimes.
Well, that's really great. I mean, I think a lot of authors do that, but you do it particularly well. And perhaps you could talk to us about Charles Dickens' Miss Havisham. I hear that that was one of your favorite characters.
I think that she is probably the all-time number one best Gothic character in literature. She's wonderful. I mean, who wouldn't love a jilted bride spending her days in a decaying wedding dress in a decaying banquet hall? It's wonderful.
With the cake and everything.
The cake and the rats and the bitterness and the orphan that she's taken in to bend to her will so that she can do all of her evil bidding and ruin men.
Yeah, I liked her. I thought she was pretty cool too. So as an adult, some of the favorite authors that you read now and why?
Gosh, well, there's so many authors. I think that one of the most recent, a couple of years ago, I read a Southern author. Her name is Bryn McLean. Her book, One Good Mama Bone, and it's just brilliant. And that stays with me. And I've had the good fortune these last couple of years to get to know her. But that's just a wonderful book. I don't recall weeping so much as while reading a book as I did when I was reading that one. So that's certainly notable. What the great thing about being an author is being able to know other authors. They really do serve as inspiration. I always like to surround myself with people that are smarter and much more talented than I am because it keeps me motivated. I have a friend who I've gotten to know over the past year, Jeffrey Del Lofton. He wrote a sort of fictionalized account of his life. It's called Red Clay Susie. I have a friend, Kimberly Brock, who lives in Atlanta, The Lost Book of Eleanor Dare, all wonderful works. Anything by Donna Everhart is wonderful. So many, and I'm sure I'm leaving people out. I have started to read Michael Ferris Smith's Salvage the World or Salvage This World. I might be getting the title wrong. He's a wonderful Southern Gothic author with contemporary themes.
Yeah, I am also a fan of Gothic, but also Southern Gothic is something that I recently discovered. And also Brent McLean. I just finished Brent's book, and I agree with you. I sat with a box of tissues.
I know. It's just so beautifully rendered, and no spoilers, but the end is just heartbreaking.
Yeah. Well, and there's just so much heart in that. And by the way, in your book also, I was totally in love with your characters. And there was an awful lot of emotion going on there too. So I just finished reading The Cicada Tree, and for listeners, this is a quick description. When an 11-year-old whiskey-drinking piano progeny encounters a wealthy family possessing supernatural beauty, her ensuing obsession unleashes family secrets and a cataclysmic plague of cicadas. Now, I know you spent some time in Florida, you're in Georgia now, but what inspired this? I know what a cicada is. Yeah,
I grew up in a small town in Southwest Georgia called Cairo. When I graduated high school, I went off to Florida, attended Florida State University, and then moved back to Georgia here in Atlanta back in 2000. So I think that the inspiration for the cicadas really came from a summer when I was probably around 10 years old. And of course, I recall the cicadas, they're with us every year. But this particular year, there was a brood unlike any that we've ever experienced, and unlike anything I've experienced since. I mean, the entire world just seemed to be covered up with cicadas, and the noise was just indescribable. So I think that I always thought that I was always fixated on that event from childhood. I think it was almost sort of a defining moment because I'm thinking, what might be going on here? Is the world ending? I mean, what's happening? We call cicadas locusts. Of course, they're not. Locusts is a totally different thing. But in my mind, I thought that something significantly biblical was happening. And
yeah.
but that always really heightened my imagination. And it just seemed to me when I was writing I write from the perspective of an 11-year-old girl in the Cicada Tree, which was on or around the age that I was when I experienced this first cicada brood. It just seemed to me to be the natural thing to do, to be able to bring that moment from childhood into the story.
I thought it was brilliant on a number of levels, but one of the reasons that I thought it was brilliant was because it gave your character as an 11-year-old girl a different perspective on what was going on. She was, well, a bit of a tomboy, I think. And so her perspective was not the perspective of the rest of the characters. And it was a nice sort of dichotomy. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so something from your bio caught my attention. And I really do love this. It says, though my tastes have evolved through the years, one constant remains: the impact of literature and art and music upon my writing, and my unrelenting quest to make and find beauty in this world. And you're certainly on a path to do that. So, do we have more in your future that you can tell us about?
Well, I'm about 30,000 words into what will probably be an 85 or 90,000 word novel. Um, I'm just a slow writer, but I'm excited about the story. It's Southern fiction, it crosses genre a bit, I think. It's darker than the Cicada Tree, and there's more world building in this new novel.
Can you
So I'm
tell us
excited
anything?
about it.
No?
Well, so it takes place in 1931 on
Okay.
a fictitious uh, Georgia coastal barrier island I'm calling Good Hope. And it's told from the perspective of a 14-year-old girl named Leontine Sky. And she lives on the marsh with her mother, Eulalie Sky. And they tend this ancient tree named Damascus. It's a hang trap tree, captures the souls of individuals who make their way across the river. That's just
Okay.
sort of the preliminary premise.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. Was there an event in your early life that inspired you to write, specifically to become an author?
When I was in the third grade in Miss Glenda Morton's third grade class at Southside Elementary School in Cairo, Georgia, on a particular day, she invited one of my classmates' moms to visit our classroom. Her name was Brenda Graham, and she was an author. She had written a book called Stone Gables, and she's still around today, and she's still writing. And I was fascinated. Up until that point in time, I always thought that authors were a bit like unicorns. Yeah, I thought they might exist, but I'd never seen one up close and in person. I thought they lived in far off magical places like New York City, places that I would probably never go or have the opportunity to 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 visit or to meet these individuals. So I think that opened the door of possibility for me that one day in that third grade class all those years ago. So from that point forward, I always felt like it was possible to be a writer. And I always felt like there were stories that I wanted to tell. I just wasn't sure how I would go about telling them.
Were you already writing at that point?
I had a vivid imagination. I would do things like I had this old-fashioned reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I would record stories. I was obsessed as a young boy with, this is embarrassing to say, daytime drama. Huge fan of soap operas. Imagine that. So I would sort of write my own, and I would act them out on this reel-to-reel. I think that started that was the origin of my storytelling. And then beyond third grade, when you begin to write essays, I enjoyed it. I always loved putting a creative spin on my essays, and I always got positive feedback from my English teachers. I always loved my English teachers, and I don't know, there was something very exciting and rewarding about getting positive feedback on those essays. So it really urged me. Well, I think it gave me the confidence to think that I might be able to write. And then I took creative writing classes in college. When I moved to Atlanta in 2000, I could sort of hear the clock ticking. And I remember thinking, if I don't start now, if I don't attempt to write, it's never going to happen. And I'm going to find myself at the end of life having not tried and be really bitter about it. So about 2003, I joined the Atlanta Writers Club. I took some writing classes. I joined a critique group, and for quite a few years, I just wrote and played in the creative sandbox. Found my way. And, part of the journey is finding your voice. I mean, who are you from a literary perspective? And I don't know, I would say that happened maybe around 2010. I was working on a project, and I thought, oh, I think this is who I am as a writer.
And but you seem to be pretty diverse, though. I mean, you have a sort of comfort zone, but it looks like you're starting to move into other avenues. So yeah,
Well, I think
darker.
I think that I hope that as a writer, I continue to evolve. The interesting thing about writing a book is that you're quite one person at the front end of it and quite a different person at the end. So I hope that I'll just continue to grow. I think I believe I'll always be a Southern storyteller, but I do hope that I'll see evolution, that I'll be experimental, that I'll try to be better than I was the story before. That's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah. So how has the pursuit of your dream to become an author been what you expected, and how has it surprised you?
But being older, I think I embrace it differently than I would have if I had been a younger person with my first novel coming out. I think more than anything, I'm just really humbled and very gracious. I'm very grateful about anything positive that has happened along the way. When the book was getting ready to come out, I mean, there's so much I didn't know, so much I still don't know. It's a steep learning curve when you're putting a book out into the world for the first time. But what has been the most surprising thing? Well, that people liked it. I think that, how do you just don't know how a work is going to be received until it makes its way out into the world. And I suppose I always knew that if I wrote a book, someone might read it. But that terrified me right before the book came out. I'm thinking, oh my God, someone might actually read this book. So that struck terror in me. So that was surprising to me that I felt that level of terror. And then this whole world of reviews, everyone's got to review everything. And then that strikes another whole chord of terror within you. When you put yourself out there, of course, people are going to chime in and they're going to judge the work. And you have to, and I did at least go in realistically knowing that there's nothing in this world that everyone's going to agree upon, that there'll be that the Cicada Tree hopefully will find its audience. There will be people that love it, and of course there will be people that won't. So I try to keep that balance intellectually inside, but it's hard sometimes emotionally to keep that balance.
Yeah, I have not had, my book hasn't been out very long, so I don't have a whole lot of reviews, but there will come the time when I get the 1-star review. And I just talked a friend of mine off the ledge, and I haven't experienced having it, but I've done PR for authors and I know how it affects an author. And when she contacted me about this, and I don't even know why she contacted me because I haven't experienced it, but I knew her to be a good writer. And I said, well, this is what happens. And now you're real. That's what I was told, is you have to get that before you're real.
Oh, absolutely. I know that I've gotten a 1-star review here and there, and it's going to happen. I uh, I just think that people actually not a review, they'll just give you a rating. So which really makes me a little angry. I'm like, well, if you're going to give me a 1-star rating, at least tell me why you hate it. But that's going to, it's going to happen. It's interesting though, you're grateful for the good things that people say, but you will remember exactly that 1-star review. You can't forget it.
Yeah. Well, what I did while she was trying to read it to me, I didn't want to hear it because it doesn't matter why they were about. The best stupid review I ever heard, 1-star, was that somebody was mad because the book arrived damaged. Like that was the author's fault.
I know.
So they're usually kind of dumb. But while she was trying to read this to me, I went ahead and popped online and I grabbed a whole bunch of 1-stars off of Stephen King and sent them to her. And I
That
said,
that was
he's doing
very
fine.
good for you. I think that I actually took myself on a similar exercise early on. Of course, I'm a bit of a cliche. Of course, I love To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh yeah.
Harper. So I went to look. Even the best, most beloved novels have people who don't like them.
Yeah.
So if there are any authors that are listening, find comfort in that. Go to some of your favorite books because someone will have said something awful about it.
Well, and an author that I spoke with recently told me that she doesn't consider reviews to be a conversation with the author. They're more conversations with other readers. Like they're saying you should or should not buy this book, and this is what I liked about it or didn't like about it. So that to me was a good take on it because it's a little bit easier not to take it personally.
Right.
Well, and
Agree.
in the same light, then the good reviews don't become so important either because they're nice, and I do like to hear what people have to say. I'd rather have a review than money, to be honest with you, because now you know that a reader read it and you get
Right.
to hear what it was that they connected with.
Well, and exactly the fact that someone took the time, first of all, to purchase your book, and then to give it their valuable time to read it, and then to be so kind as to rate it and to say a few words about it. That's cause to celebrate there, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Now, of course, if someone just sort of gives you a really awful star and then they don't say anything and they just sort of vanish, that's one thing. But you're right, it really is. When someone goes to all of that trouble, it really is a gift.
Yeah, I also ask readers, since most of my listeners are readers, to not just leave the review on Amazon, cut and paste and put it on Goodreads and BookBub,
Yes.
and Barnes and Noble, because that is the lifeblood for an author. And not everybody finds their books on Amazon.
No.
So, yeah. So,
Agreed. It is important. And I didn't realize just how important some of those things were until I was out in the middle of it. So it's critical. The kindest thing a reader can do is to take the time to to leave a rating and to say a few words, certainly. I do um I do sort of think of, my book as a baby. It's my baby though. Yeah, I do sort of think of it as my baby, and I want people to think that it's an adorable baby. Oh, that Robert Gwaltney's got the ugliest baby you've ever seen. That's not something you want to hear.
Well, I think that the awards are telling you that your baby is pretty adorable.
Thank you. Yeah, that's it is good to get. I think that writers and artists in general are a little insecure. So we do on occasion need validation. So it is good when people say kind things, and I'm certainly grateful that that Cicada Tree has been well received in my circle. So I'm very happy for that, certainly.
It certainly has been well received and talked about too. And the imposter syndrome is normal. Everybody goes through that. And in case nobody has said anything about this, and I'm not speaking as an author, I'm speaking as an ex-publicist to authors. The imposter syndrome never goes away. So
No, I don't think that I don't think that it will. I
mm,
do feel that that way, and maybe there's a healthy aspect to that, I suppose.
I think
Um,
so.
I think it keeps you grounded.
I think so. I think also that becoming an author is so difficult. You don't just have to find your voice and you don't just have to find your courage and you don't have to just step out. You have to find your community too, because along the way you have you have to have some support. I was very lucky in that I was in some writing groups when I really had no interest in publishing. I was writing, but I wasn't really trying to publish. So by the time I got to the point where I thought, well, maybe I'll try to publish something, but at least I had my community. I already had found my tribe, sort of. And I know that you found that through the Atlanta Writers Club. That's a
It's some
fantastic. Yeah.
it is it's a great group. I joined the Atlanta Writers Club. I'm on the board of the Broadleaf Writers Group, which is another wonderful organization. Yeah, Atlanta is such a wonderful literary community.
Yeah.
And authors, it's been my experience that everyone's so kind and has been and they're extremely generous. So we're very fortunate. I'm very fortunate, to live in a place like Atlanta where there is a very rich and diverse writing community.
Absolutely. I have been coming back and forth so much that Atlanta area has become a second home. And my husband and I considered living there. I don't think that's what we're going to do, but it's very tempting because the writing community is extremely strong and very active, and there's all sorts of things going on for both writers and readers. So
Certainly.
anybody is looking for a place, Atlanta is a good place. And I've lived places where it was really hard to find that too. I lived in Phoenix for a while, and it's a big city, but not a lot of people on the East Coast. And then Atlanta, of course, there's a lot of people.
Right.
So yeah, so I had found that the sort of lack of people, it was a hard thing for me in Atlanta. I was in North Florida and I was belonged to three different writing groups, and that was really helpful. So it's depends on where you are. But I will say that now that things are online, it's a little bit easier.
I think so. I agree. It's much easier to connect with people. I do have some writer friends who their groups comprised of individuals across the United States. So that's really cool. I think the pandemic helped close some of those gaps in communication for us. If anything positive came out of it, I think it was our use of technology.
Yeah. No, I'm completely with you there. I did not have a writers group in Phoenix, and then the pandemic hit. Well, it was just before the pandemic, and a writer friend of mine, author friend of mine, got me a scholarship to a writers retreat over on Ossabaw Island, just off the coast of Savannah. And
Yeah.
we were there for 6 days, and it was very intense. I wrote the first six chapters of my book there, and then I came back to Phoenix, but I came home really dreading having to write alone. And I got home, and I had made a dear friend on the island, and she lived in Atlanta, and she introduced me to three writing groups, which I'm still a member of all three.
Mm.
And then I found a group in Las Vegas and one in Utah, and so now, like you said, if anything has come out of it, it's that you don't really have to be by yourself. You can find somebody online. And I would
Which is
advise,
nice.
yeah, I would advise anybody who's looking for a writers group to look at the Atlanta Writers Club, because there's people in that group that are not necessarily in Atlanta.
True. Agreed. It's fun. You mentioned riding retreat. It's a bit like going off to summer camp where you find your people. And when it's all over, you just are weeping. You don't want to leave.
It was, I had never heard of Ossipah, and now I worried when the person who originally owned it passed away. I worried that they would sell it and turn it into some kind of resort, just all these things. And it's, yeah, I mean, I knew about Savannah, but yeah, there's a lot of good memories for me on that island. So, so if Cicada Tree was made for a movie, who would play Annalise?
Oh my gosh. It's interesting. When I wrote the book, I didn't envision, I know some people will envision actors or these sort of archetypal figures. And for Annalise, I because I was writing from her perspective, anytime that I would see her on the page, and I know this sounds peculiar, but it's almost as if I never really fully saw her face because I was her when I was writing the book. Um, and I didn't have that experience with the other characters. I think that, yeah, I don't really know who the young actresses are now. I would imagine that if they were to cast the Cicada Tree, and maybe one day it would be made into a movie. I think all authors, we all dream of that. It would be lovely to see our work translated to the screen, adapted. Um, so I think it would probably be someone that no one's ever heard of.
Mm.
But when I think about Cordelia Mayfield, one of the antagonists, that's the only character that I actually could envision actresses. I thought of Kate Blanchett. I thought
Ooh,
of Nicole Kidman, a blonde Nicole Kidman being Cordelia
oh, I can see that.
Mayfield.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, just someone long and tall and sinewy.
Hmm. Hmm. And with that slow talk, yeah,
Yeah,
I can see that. Very statuesque, very prim and proper type of person.
yes.
Yeah. So I don't want to ruin the book for people, but yeah. So, well, the second question was, how about the other characters? And you've already answered that. So is there a
Yeah.
question I have not asked that you would have liked me to ask?
No, I've enjoyed the conversation. I think yeah, I always enjoy having these conversations with individuals, and I'm never really particular. I just wherever the conversation takes us, I'm happy to go there.
Well, it's been a joy speaking with you again, and I probably am going to run into you in person. I'm going to be at a couple events that you'll be there. So I'll say hello the next time.
Please, I look
Yeah,
forward to it.
yeah, me too. But it has been my pleasure. I've really enjoyed having you as a guest, and I would like you to keep me in mind for future because I'd like to have you back and see what's going on in your life coming up, in the next year or two or however long. So let
I
me,
would love that. It's a date.
that sounds good. Well, thank you, Robert, very much.
Thank you.